Hey guys, here we are, the Quiggin Out MMA Podcast, the episode 68. I know you've all been looking for because I know we jumped from 67 to 69, but we had to save something special for somebody we talked about in episode 69. And I've got a very special guest, somebody I've been trying to get on the show for 68 episodes, and timing finally worked out. So the one, the only Rob Kahn. How you doing, sir?
How you doing, Matt? Glad to be here.
So I'm so happy to have you. I know we've crossed paths for so many years. We've been in the same circles, and obviously, the love of MMA and jujitsu. It's really amazing to have you on here because, as most people know, and if they don't, they're about to. You were Royce Gracie's first black belt, so like it's kind of a big deal for the show.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, but I was in the first five. Like we all got them the same day, so I want to make sure I'm giving shine to the other four guys who got them that same day with me.
I don't know any of the other four guys, so you're number one. Like that's how that works. Listen, no, and it's not to take anything away from that, but like you have a moniker that, and in this case, five people can hold on to, being one of his first black belts. So like, I kind of just want to talk about like where jujitsu got started for you, because you've been a black belt now, if I'm not mistaken, for almost 20 years. So you've got quite a bit of history behind you when it comes
Yes.
to that. So talk about like why jujitsu, like where did that come from?
Well, it started for me way back in the end of '94. Um, I was going to college, and I used to box growing up on and off for years, and I was competing in the novice Golden Gloves my senior year, and I just uh, 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 the guy's his name is John Burke. And obviously, he's got the school in Orlando now, but we were introduced in college, and he kind of suckered me because he had some. I think he had maybe had just gotten his blue belt at that point, and it was incredibly rare for anybody on the East Coast to have any jujitsu experience in 1994
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
early '95. It was somewhere around there, and I certainly hadn't even heard of it. And so John was like, explaining it to me. We met through mutual friends up at our college in Binghamton, New York, and he was like, I'd like to spar with a boxer, and I said, sure. And I'd sparred with other martial arts over the years with boxing and stuff. And, it was kind of like overall, I didn't get it. I wasn't super impressed. I didn't feel like they did enough live sparring so that when it was live, I thought they usually kind of weren't impressive to me. And so I kind of went into it with this attitude like, oh, another freaking jujitsu guy, whatever, And about 5 seconds into it, when I was choking and being armbarred and being and granted and bear in mind, John was a fairly new blue belt, I think, at this point, and he manhandled me, and I was just like so shocked about like how easily it was, and it just the jujitsu just seemed super effective. Like it just made a lot of sense to me. And it's funny. I didn't know anything at that point, but for some reason I knew this is what I wanted to do. And fortunately, me and John became really good friends. We moved out to California together. I had a bunch of adventures out there training with Hoyce. Um, and, and we're still really good friends to this day. He's over in Orlando now. He's got Gracie Orlando.
And see, that's crazy because I've seen the interactions. Like I was there when you had the Royce Gracie seminar, and that was the first time I had met Royce. And I just remember like watching the seminar and being just blown away because he is the pioneer of the sport. He's the person, that everybody looks up to, as everybody looks at as the one who kind of catapulted everything, even though it was the combined efforts of everybody putting it on and, really like marketing that. But I'll never forget. We've told this, like I said, we've told this on the show. I was lucky enough to sit in a circle with you, Royce Gracie, Matt Arroyo, and Christopher James were all there. And I just remember the two of you telling stories back and forth. And Hoyce said something about you, and you just said, fuck you, Hoyce. And you pushed him, and he fell over. And I went, you can't do that to him. And he was just like, hobby, hobby, hobby. And I just remember that interaction being like, we forget sometimes that like these legends, these pioneers of the sport, they're people too. And like the stories you guys have, I can't even imagine some of the things you're probably not even allowed to say that the two of you
Oh,
have done together.
I mean, Hoist is about as cool and as laid back and as like grounded dude you're ever going to meet. He loves the bus chops, which works great with me because I like the bus chops too. So, we've had like a 27-year relationship where we just bust each other's chops and just have a good old time with each other, man. He's been nothing but a really good friend to me all these decades at this point. Super good
But
dude, man.
did you have any idea 20 plus, like you said, 27 years ago, that he would be such an essential part of your life? Did you think he would still be a part of it given, what he had done in the prior years, 93, November being that UFC one and all that, the fame, and I don't want to say fortune because that's not really what it was, but did you have any idea that you guys would still be friends 27 years later and be as close as you are now?
Not really. Like when I first started, like, your goals change, obviously. When I first started doing the jujitsu with Burke, um, I was still training for the Golden Gloves, so I was doing it when I could with Burke. And anybody who's done jujitsu knows the beginning of is kind of really slow. You have to kind of learn the method to the madness. It takes a little bit to start making for this stuff. I think to start making sense. When I mean a little
Yeah.
bit, I mean a couple of months. Before like, oh, okay, I understand the method here. I get what's going on here. And so like in the beginning, I just remember you know, when I had that first interaction with Burke, I couldn't believe how helpless I was on the ground. So my goal really was just to learn enough to be, fairly. So at least I knew what I was doing. Just in God forbid something happened, and
Yeah.
um, and then me and Burke went out to California that summer. It was the summer of '95, and I had trained with Burke. Like I said, I was training for the Golden Gloves, so me and Burke trained sporadically in that spring. So when I went out there, I knew, like how to pass a guard, um, how to roll somebody out of the mount, the Americana, a couple things like that. Um, but I didn't really know much. I hadn't really sparred yet. Burke, we didn't spar. We were just doing lessons. So when I went out to California that summer, and I started training. Me and Burke were training every day from opening to close.
Jeez.
That summer '95, like we'd get there at like 9 in the morning, we'd leave 9 at night, and so that's when the bug hit me. That's when I was like, when I started, like being able to spar and saw the beauty of it and saw the logic of it. I fell in love with it. That's like after I got back from that summer, everything changed for me in terms of like what my plans were going to be, where I wanted to spend my time, what I was going to do with my life. All that kind of changed after that summer of '95.
I mean, that's amazing because like you said, training for the Golden Gloves, and I didn't start watching MMA until like 2008. I got into the game really late. And I think I was 5 years into watching the sport. It was 08, 09, and I just remember seeing the ground game and going, "Just get up." Like, why isn't he just getting up, and feeling so like dumb about it? And then I trained a couple times and I had somebody put me in that position and I tried to get up and I was like, I can't move.
And not so
Like
easy.
I don't know what the hell's going on. So like, years of, and I know my professor Mike Geary, like he was like, Matt, come into class. Just come into class. Like the concepts. Now you need to learn the actions. All that because it's again, I'm watching something and I'm like, oh, if he steps over here, goes for this, he's gonna go for the Kimura, he's gonna do this, he's gonna do that. And people would watch it with me and they're like, how long have you been training? I'm like, no, I don't train. And they're like, so it took until it was actually that when hoisted his seminar in
Oh, the
2019
one
when
of
I
my,
went to, yeah.
the one, oh, very cool, very cool.
And I said, you know what? I said, I need to get my ass on the mat. And I said, I want to get a blue belt by next year, which starting in 2019, I gave myself a year to get a blue belt. And I was moving along and I like, and I'm feeling it. I'm feeling good. And then COVID hits and I'm like, shit. I'm like, well, there goes that plan.
Yeah,
And, you were training.
COVID kind
No,
of put a little monkey wrench into close contact sports for a while.
yeah. Well, and you know that it's documented now, and we can all say it without fear of retaliation. Schools were still training. They were putting boards up on the windows. They were making sure that people weren't seeing it. We were training with masks. You know how hard it is to do jujitsu with a mask on?
Well, I know it. I know it. It's
And
it's definitely not
I'll
meant for
never
masks.
forget. I said, okay, maybe 2021. And I remember June of 2020, I'm sitting at promotions and they called my name for a blue belt. And I was like, are you sure? Like, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
That's
And
the
literally the
um,
first role I had with a blue belt was with my professor. And he looked at me and he goes, "You feel ready, don't you?" And I went, "Yeah, I do. Yeah, I really do." Like it was a weird feeling where I felt really good. So, people don't realize that the mental and emotional aspects of jujitsu besides the physical part. I know we kind of went off on a tangent, but like you said, once you felt that, oh, I don't like how this feels, like I'm getting dominated, like I got to know how to do this. It's like an
yeah.
addiction when it comes to that. So, like, it's cool to know that you had the exact same feeling. Like,
It's like, the other guy could be, um, it's like a language to itself, and somebody might be bigger, stronger, faster, whatever. But if they don't understand the language, like they're still going to feel lost in there. It's an amazing. It really is an amazing art, and it just gets better and better the longer you train. It really does.
well, yeah, and I mean, I say it's easier for you to say, but like, you started training around 95, you had the Golden Gloves experience, and then you got a black belt within 10 years at that point.
Yeah, I got my so I started June. It was June or July 1st, 1995. I got my black belt in 2004 in
Yeah.
September.
That's amazing that you remember all that. But I honestly, like, that's a big milestone in your life. People have the birth of kids, they have marriages, but like a black belt in jujitsu, a per, maybe 2% of everybody who trains is going to get to that point. Like, I know it's
Yeah,
got to be a very small percentage.
yeah, it has to be. I mean, I think nowadays um, it's a little different now because there are so many schools. It is more convenient to train, so it's a little easier to train. But you're right. Like everything, all the conditions are perfect. It's still going to take you, upwards of 7 to 10 years to get a black belt if you're training consistently. And that's on the quick end.
Yeah. And that is on the quick end because, like you said, you can pull six black belts from around the world who've been training the exact same amount of time. They're going to be on completely different levels.
Oh yeah,
And it's
yeah. There's
it's it's
there's
crazy.
there's like anything else. There's levels to black belts too, and and you know, and also there's levels to, like me at 52 years old, I'm not the same guy I was when I got my black belt at 33. There's, but my knowledge base is probably significantly better.
God, no. I'm gonna be 35, and I just think about the fact that like having a blue belt at 35 and you being a black belt at 33, like it's kind of amazing because you did have it much harder. There wasn't, I could drive down the road and pass 10 schools within a 15-mile radius. You
Well, I'll tell
couldn't
you, when
do
I
that.
started, like what I told you, I met Burke in at school in Binghamton, and then I was graduating that year. When I came back to, I lived down in downstate New York, closer to the city, and what you call it, the if you wanted to do jujitsu at that point, you basically either had to go to Brazil or go to California, like, because there was nothing in between. Henzo hadn't gotten to New York City yet, so your options are very, very. I mean, there might have been some other jujitsu that I didn't know about in the country at that point, but it was very, very limited. So I didn't really have much choice. I went to LA.
Well, that's crazy too, because if you don't know the history about it, and I don't pretend to be a jujitsu history buff by any means, but people think of Royce as like the father of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he really did a lot to just bring it to light. He wasn't the first one doing it. You know, you've got the whole family doing it, and Royce definitely wasn't their first choice for UFC. That's not, a secret. Everyone's like, he's the smallest guy. Yeah, let's let
Well,
him do it.
he was the first choice for that reason. Um, from
Well,
from
I
my
mean, like, normally, like, you wouldn't pick him first, but they were like, "No, no,
no, You know what I'm saying? Yeah, they picked Hoist because he wasn't physically imposing, and they wanted to show the world how effective it was, without people going, well, look, like if they used Hickson. Hickson looked like freaking peak male athlete. It wouldn't have been as impressive if Hickson did it. That's the story I heard anyway.
Hickson is generally the second Gracie I think of, obviously besides Hoist, because I'll never forget watching the Pride fights, and he would just stand like this, and when he would come forward, he would just walk diagonally. He wouldn't walk in a straight line. He would just diagonal cut. And I was like, this dude's gonna run through the screen and punch me in the face. Like, I was scared watching Hickson fights. So that
Man,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, he was the guy. I remember, I wanted to get a private lesson with him, way back from blue, purple, brown, all through there, even black. I was trying to get. He was like my white whale. I wanted to feel, because I can't tell you, going back, like the best jujitsu guys from Brazil that I rolled with in the the late '90s into the early 2000s. I mean, some really, really, really high level guys. And I'd ask them, like, "Hey, man, what's it like to roll with Hickson?" And they just look at me like and shake their head blankly, like, I get murdered, I get killed. And I'm just like, how could they be this good? As a blue belt, I remember Henzo said that to me. I mean, Henzo, who is, absolutely one of the greatest of all time, was just smashing me when I took a private with him back in the '90s. And he's such a personable guy. And at the end, we're talking at the end of the private, and I was like, hey, can I ask you a question? Like, what's it like to roll with Hickson? And Enzo's just like, man, he kills me. Actually, his exact phrase was, he goes, did you see what I just did to you? And I go, yeah. He goes, Hickson does that to me. I was like, I couldn't even, as a blue belt, I couldn't even process that
No.
you could take that somebody as good as Henzo, who just gave me a thorough beating, like thorough is not even the right word for it, that somebody could do it to him. It was just crazy to me.
So
Just
the
crazy.
question is, did you get that private with Hickson? Did you ever get
Never
that?
did. Never did. I tried. Anytime I was in LA, when I moved back, and anytime I was in LA, I'd call up and try and get a private lesson, and even when I got my black belt in like '04, '05, '06, I was out there a few times. By then, I think Hickson kind of wasn't really even teaching that much anymore,
Mhm.
or he wasn't at the academy much, because I never got a chance to. Never got a chance. That was my white whale. Never got a chance to roll with him.
See, that blows my mind. That also makes me feel better. It's like Hickson is that person for me. Hickson's that person where I'm like, you watch that like over imposing style that he had when it came to MMA, when it came to jujitsu, and you talk to all these people, and they all say the same thing. They're all like, Hickson, like no, like it's kind of like, we'll give you $1 million or a chance to roll with Hickson, and they would go Hickson, 100%. Like they wouldn't even take the money because that's what it meant to roll and to be on the mat with him.
Yeah, I mean, between Mario, sorry, between Henzo, um, Salo Ribeiro said the same thing to me. Hoyler, of course, Hoyce, like, and then there was a bunch of guys at the academy back in the day who were still there when Hickson was teaching. You know, Lowell Anderson, Richard Bressler, every one of them is just like. I mean, I've heard stories that I don't even know if I could repeat, that, like, where Hickson would just go through the room of really high level guys, one after the other, um, no break, just toying with elite level jujitsu guys. Like, it's just crazy. It's just crazy.
And it's amazing because if you ask the layman, if you ask somebody who's never trained jujitsu who Hickson is, who's better, Hickson or Hoist, they're going to say Hoist because that's who they know. But Hickson is really that person who hopefully one of these days one of them watches this show because that would be really awesome. But like you said, he's the white whale, and for you to be training as long as you have, to be, I don't want to say revered, but really that's, you're Rob Kahn. Like you're one of the staples in Florida. There's you, Professor Ross Kellen, Michael, Professor Mike Geary. Like you three were like the guys in Florida, when it comes to it. And for you to say something like, if Hickson called into the show right now and said, "Hey, Abby, I want to roll with you," you'd be like, "Okay, let's go." Like there wouldn't even be a hesitation, would there?
Oh no, and that's like a national monument. It's like going to DC and not stopping by and seeing what the Washington Monument looks like.
And anybody else who has watched a Marvel movie saw Hickson in the Hulk movie with Edward Norton and was like, "Oh, that guy's cool."
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was in the Hulk,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he did that weird fucking breathing thing. Oh,
Yeah,
still
he's been
bothers
doing
me to this day.
that Ashtanga yoga thing mixed with I forgot the name of the guy who was big with that breathing. I think it was Alvaro Romano or no, that was the gymnastic and natural guy. Yeah, I think maybe that was him. But yeah, that's some crazy stuff he does with his
Yeah,
stomach
the
and
diaphragm and everything. I'm like, oh. So
super impressive.
it's crazy. So like, let's
You know,
fast forward to
the last point about Hickson though, the only thing that like you know we never got to see Hickson in his absolute prime against like a world class guy. You know, and I'm confident that Hickson would have won. I just would have loved to have
100%.
seen that Sakuraba fight with Hickson, still in his mid 30s. That would have been. I think that would have been just a capper. But one of those fights you just didn't get a chance to see.
Well, and I know his fights with Hoist, and then like looking back at the Gracies and any of the Pride element, Henzo getting his arm broken, they stopped the fight, and he's like, "Why? What's wrong?" And his arm like flapping around. It's a different breed,
Henzo
man.
is the definition of a warrior. Henzo is just dead game, man. The way he had his arm broken and was like, yeah, whatever, let's keep going.
Listen, man, I take an armbar wrong, and I'm like, time out, time. Okay, I'm done. Henzo's like, no, I'm good. And they're like, your arm is just, it was
He,
cartoonesque. It really
yeah,
was.
it was. Yeah, I can't even look at it. It was so gross. I don't like dislocations, which is shocking considering what I do for a living. But like
But it's
that
never
shit
your
grosses me
goal.
out.
It's never your goal to do that to somebody.
Oh no, no.
And
I
and I think what people lack in the jujitsu world is that like when you're white belts, you have the white belt spaz. We have all been there and you've seen it, I'm sure, countless times where they're just like, I've got to prove I belong here. And to everybody training, to anybody who's watching this, don't do that shit.
it's
Listen to
it's
the professors. Like,
it's so hard to get that out of people because people fight like the people's normal defense mechanism is adrenaline and
yeah,
like high energy explosive movements because that's what your brain defaults to and thinks what it should be doing. And as you know, that's not jujitsu. Jujitsu
no,
is way different. It's way more subtle. It's thinking your way through problems and always kind of trying to default to being the most relaxed you can be, not the most spazzy, not the most anxious.
yeah. And you know that in those moments, like, you're in a tournament, you're going for a Kimura, you're twisting that arm. You want to let go, but you have to know when to tap. And I think being humble and knowing when to tap are probably the two most important lessons to start with jujitsu and to continue with jujitsu. Like just to have that moment where you're just like, do I really need a broken arm today? Or do I really need this guy knowing for the rest of his life that he broke my arm because I didn't want to tap?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a huge piece of it, and just for preserving yourself, to want to do this for decades, you can't roll like that, or you're just going to be nursing so many injuries down the road.
Yeah.
Um, just don't, people who wait to that last second to tap, man, you're splitting hairs because maybe you don't get the explosive break that we're talking about, but you're going to get some damage to the joints and the tendons, and that's going to start adding up over time.
Yeah, and this isn't a sport for, this isn't a sport for the meek. And I say that because, like, people who play football know they're going to get hurt. You know, people who play football aren't doing it for mental reasons. It's not to clear their head. They're doing it for a job, they're doing it for a paycheck, and maybe they love doing it. But jujitsu is such a different animal when it comes down to it because there are going to be injuries. It's going to happen. You're going to get kneed in the head by accident. And it's how you react to that, whether you jump up and try to fight the person or you realize that you're two people in a flow and it just happened.
Yeah, yeah. But if you do jujitsu right, if you do it the way it's supposed to be done, the injuries are they're kept to a huge minimum. The
Yeah.
injuries usually happen with the newer belts. Usually, when you see a couple of advanced belts rolling, again, I'm talking about in a sparring context, not in a tournament.
Mhm.
The the chances of injuries goes down quite a bit. I believe once you get up in that purple, brown, black um, arena. In a
Absolutely.
sparring context, not a tournament, because tournaments, shit
Tournament's
happens.
free for all.
You're trying to
That's
win
what
it.
scared me the most is that like I wanted to compete as a white belt. And when I got my blue belt, I was actually more upset that I got it than when I didn't get it because I was like, I wanted to compete as a white belt. I said, because as a blue belt, I'm gonna get my ass kicked.
You go back to the
And
bottom of the barrel, right?
yeah, right. Well, I'm not a small guy. We've talked about it on the show, so I'm in the super ultra heavyweight at this point. So I'm anywhere from 230 plus, and I was like, that's not fair to me. So
Yeah,
that's my next step.
that's a ridiculous cutoff, because there's such a big difference between a guy who's 230 and a guy who's 280. Yeah,
Not only that, a guy who's 280 is probably like 6'4", 6'5",
yeah,
whereas like I'm 5'10" and 280. That's a
yeah,
different person. Like that's a different kind of animal you're dealing with. So that's that's coming up this year. We got to get back into it. I've been dealing with kind of a knee thing, which didn't happen in training, and I'm still trying to figure out what happened because I my knee hurts more not training than when it did when I did train. So I'm trying to figure that one out because jujitsu is a weird animal when it comes to that too.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. And the older you get, the more those phantom injuries start popping up every time you step off the mat.
So this just off the cuff, what's the weirdest phantom injury you've ever had? Like what was the weirdest one that you were like, "What the hell happened?"
Let me think. Okay, I tore. Let's see. The ankle it was pretty dramatic when I tore my ankle up, but it wasn't weird. What was weird was I tore both bicep tendons like a week apart in both the left and the right arm. So I had to have reconstructive surgery on both the left and the right
Oh shit.
arms a week apart, and just like
And it was
freak, like stupid, like nothing, nothing major. Like it wasn't like a submission I didn't tap to. It was just like I'm trying to remember exactly the circumstances, but I don't remember. But neither one were like a submission or something dramatic. It was just like planting my hand here or whatever. One guy hipped into my elbow, I think, and left and right tore a week apart.
oh god.
I have to have reconstructive on both of them a week apart, which was fun having two arm braces for the next 3 months after that.
Did you teach? Did you still try to go teach?
Oh, I still taught. In fact, so Matt Arroyo was competing at the EBI um, in California, and it was a big tournament. It was a big match, early one of the early EBIs, I believe. And I literally got out of the hospital, jumped on a plane with two freaking arm braces, flew to California so I can go coach him. Which I didn't really think that one through, because navigating your way around LA in locked out two arm braces, um, still on Novi, still on the whatever that knocks you out, or not, that numbs the pain, wasn't
Yeah.
probably the most well thought out thing I've ever done, but um, I made it. It was successful, and I got back alive.
See, and that's the dedication though, because in that moment, I feel like once you do jujitsu, like other things in life kind of take a back seat that they used to. Like I had dental surgery a couple years ago, and they took 10 teeth at once.
Ooh,
And I remember they gave me the first shot, and I was just like, okay. I'm like looking around, and they're kind of looking at me like, you're supposed to be asleep by now. And the girl had to give me a second IV right in the hand. And she's like, you don't like needles, right? And I was like, no. And she turns my head to the side and puts the needle in. I was like, is it supposed to burn? And she goes, yeah, that's pretty normal. And I'll never forget, I heard a JBL speaker kick on. And I remember that sound distinctly. And I heard, and I was like, oh shit, we're going to listen to. And I remember just being out. But I woke up before they were done.
Oh,
And
wow.
I jerked right before, and they were like, hold on, we're almost finished. They were literally like pulling everything out at the end. And I woke up and they said, okay, it's time to wake up. And I went, guys, I'm already awake. And they're like, okay, we need you to sit up slowly. And I sat up. I literally stood up and walked in a circle. And two nurses grabbed me and shoved me back onto the table. They're like, you can't do that. But I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm like air drumming on the table. I'm like, hands and legs are going. And they're like, you are not okay. And I said, I'm fine. And I remember my girlfriend drove me home because you couldn't drive. Obviously, driving would have been horrible
A
idea.
disaster.
And I walked up. We live on the second floor. I walked up the stairs, no railing, walked into the house, and I literally walked towards the bed and literally passed out for like
And
4
stayed
hours.
there for 16 continuous hours.
And I woke up, the gauze in my mouth, and I read the instructions. They were like, don't fall asleep with gauze in your mouth. You could die. And I went,
Oh, you knew that for next time.
yeah. but jujitsu definitely changed how you think about things. When something hurt, you're like, okay, it hurts. Doesn't hurt enough for me to be concerned. And I think,
Yeah.
we've talked about it with, my knee on the last couple episodes where I had a night. I haven't trained in 2.5 months. It's the longest stretch I haven't trained in a while. I literally put on my gi, I stood up from the couch, and I fell down. And I said, I don't want to go to class. I said, because I don't know what that's going to do when I'm trying to, pass a guard, when I'm trying to stop somebody from passing my guard. I don't know what it's going to do. And
Yeah.
it's literally
Yeah.
terrifying. And so next week, I'm back on the mats. To everyone
Oh,
watching,
good.
I am back.
Yeah. The classic question: are you hurt or are you injured?
Wow, that's prolific, man. Like that's put that on
Hurt,
a shirt.
okay. Injured,
Yeah.
no.
Well, and that's the thing is that I accepted that there would be times where I'm going to be hurt. I was never a physical person. I was never a football player. I was never a fighter. I was never any of that. But jujitsu spoke a different language to me. It spoke a different kind of flow, the human chess aspect, like being 3 steps ahead and kind of flowing with somebody and kind of understanding what's going on. And the more I've done it, I'm still a blue belt. Like I'm on that cusp of purple belt, but I've still got some time and I'm not rushing it at all. And I think to anybody training, don't rush it. Don't think because you didn't get promoted as fast as somebody next to you that you're not as good as they are, because it's a whole different journey. Um,
I used to always think that I, 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 I think it's always better to be the blue belt in the room that all the purple belts are scared of than be the purple belt that all the blue belts want to roll with. You know,
ooh.
the later you get promoted, the better has always been kind of my thought on that.
Yeah, and I think for me, like when I'm ready, I'm ready. Like, and that's what I love about, you've got a lot of people out there who promote to promote. And I'm not pointing anybody out. I don't have any specific examples, but you see people who are just promoting, because that's what's going on. And I feel like versus when you came up, do you think that's happening more often than we really want to talk about?
Oh my
Where
God, 1000%. Like, it's unfortunately, I think a lot of it is just the way things happen in America. When Taekwondo came here, you know, whatever you think about the effectiveness, the street effectiveness of Taekwondo, those guys, when they got promoted back in the day, they were badasses, and then it kind of went into the whole pizza parties and birthday things and, glorified babysitting. And now people get a black belt like in 6 months. And when I first started with jujitsu, I thought to myself, that's never going to happen with jujitsu. It's combat art. You got to prove yourself on the mat all the time, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, that didn't hold up because I think the proliferation of, mediocre belts, especially at the black belt level, has been very, very high over the last decade or so.
And that's sad to say that, to hear it from you, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense because, I can say with 100% accuracy, like I've rolled with some of your black belts. Like I've rolled with your black belts and they have whooped my ass. Kevin Gallagher, I got to roll with, Ben Zapata. I was still a white belt at the time. Like people who came from that family of yours, and
Yeah.
seeing some of the recent black belts like Maria. I know Maria was super excited to get her black belt, and I know she still says she doesn't think she's a black belt, but Maria, I know
Oh,
you're gonna
she
watch
is.
this, and if you don't watch this, we're gonna call you out on it. So just so you know.
No, Maria's a killer. Yeah, and I've always kind of prided myself on keeping my promotion standards like on the rough side. Making people have to work for each belt. Especially obviously to me the big belts are the purple belt and the black belt. Um, and I always told my guys, like, if there's even a slight question in my head of whether or not you deserve the belt, you're not getting it.
Yeah, and
You know, like
I think when somebody says I deserve a black belt, you're not ready for a black belt, and that's just my opinion of that because it's not your decision to make. If
no,
you've put in the work and you've showed that they think, you think I'm ready for it, okay, that's fine. But I will never go into a promotion and say, I deserve this. This bullshit,
no,
I didn't get it. Like, no.
and like there should be no question. It should be, like I said, you should be, in my opinion, the blue belt that a lot of purple belts don't want to roll with, the purple
Yeah.
belt that the brown belts stay away from. That to me, that's when it's done right, and that's when the promotion should happen. Now, granted, that is, it's also tempered with, I'm not going to hold, say, a 50, 60-year-old guy to the same standards I hold a 20-year-old in terms of fighting ability, but I will hold them to the same standard in terms of technical knowledge, being able to execute the moves, understanding jujitsu and the flow. All that stuff has to be the same. But yeah, I'm not going to expect some older 65-year-old dude to be able to have tap all the brown belts before he gets a black belt.
No.
That's not a thing either.
And I think they got to respect that, and that I feel like that's an interesting take on it because you're right. 30-year-old black belt versus 60-year-old black belt. 30-year-old's probably going to have some speed. 30-year-old's probably going to have less injuries. Like it's probably going to happen, but it doesn't mean that 60-year-old is any less a black belt.
No, no, my again, this is only my
Oh
way
no,
of
I
doing
want
things.
yours. That's bring it.
I, when I'm thinking about promoting somebody, first off, I get in my head where I think they are, like what type of natural, like, first of all, let me just say this. There is a minimum standard that every single belt, you need to get past this minimum standard I have in my head for every single belt, for sure. Um, but so if I have, say, like a Matt Arroyo, who was just like a phenom blue belt when he first started with me,
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to hold Matt Arroyo to that minimum standard when he gets his purple belt because he's too good. He's too talented. I could see the talent in the guy. So for me, holding him to that minimum standard, I think is wrong. Like I now have to kind of figure out what standard Matt needs to make before he's ready for his purple belt because he was a super talented kid.
Yeah. And I think that's how it should be looked at. On the outside looking in, if I was in your position, you can't hold everybody to the same standard, which is why everybody who trains needs to understand it's jujitsu is a team journey for yourself.
Yeah,
And I think that's the best
absolutely.
way to describe it because you wouldn't be there without the rest of your people, and the rest of your people wouldn't be there without you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is absolutely like so much of the learning. Obviously, I think sometimes myself, in case in point, you get so much credit for when guys are doing well, but it's not just you. I mean, other than maybe fostering that environment where they can interact and train with each other and share knowledge, and obviously you're the teacher, so you're going to take some credit for it. But like,
Yes.
if there isn't that interaction and sharing and a lot of people, on the mat, they learn from the other blue belts, from the purple belts, from, and obviously just from doing it, but it's absolutely a team. It's crazy. I can't tell you some of the crazy shit I've seen over the years. I remember, where was I? Oh, I can't remember where I was, and I don't know if I would even say it if I remembered, but I remember I was rolling with somebody. Where was this? Was it? Oh no, it was the Gracie Academy. I guess I could blow them up. Um, and I was like a fairly new blue belt, and I'm rolling with this guy in the private room, and he catches me in something. And again, I was a pretty new blue belt, but I was aware that this guy set me up for it, like caught me with it. And I was like, oh wow, that was cool. What'd you do? And he's like, I don't know. I was just like, what do you mean you don't know? You just caught me in it. Like, I saw it. He's like, yeah, I don't know. It just kind of happened. And I was just like, wow, you're an incredible dick. And and then, shortly thereafter, I remember, I don't know if you know who Phil McLaurice is,
Mhm.
but Phil is a incredibly talented black belt up in Philadelphia. He was he was part of the Gracie Academy at that time. And like I said, I was a newer blue belt, like a really new blue belt. And Phil should have already, in my opinion, was already certainly a purple belt, but he was still like wearing the four stripe blue. But I mean, I saw him tap out purple belts all the time at this level. And I remember one day we were rolling in a private room, and like I said, I was only a few months into jujitsu, and like he broke down everything for me. Like he was like, "Oh, this is what you did wrong. You got to fix this," or whatever. He just went into super detail and showed me, and then he'd show me what he caught me in, how he set me up, and I just remember like it increased just that one or two lessons with him because he was only out at the academy for about a week, so maybe we trained together 3 times, and I just remember like my jujitsu got exponentially better after that week because of the private, the 2 or 3 sessions I had with Phil. And I always remembered how grateful I felt um, for somebody to do that. And that's when I was on the mat and I became like the more senior guy. I always wanted to make sure I did the same thing because I always
Yeah.
remember how much gratitude I had for Phil.
Yeah, and I feel like that to me is, when you look at any sport, not all football players are good coaches. Not all coaches were good football players. When it comes to jujitsu, like you have to be able to explain what's going on. And I've been in those moments where when I was starting out and I'm rolling with a brown belt who's now a black belt, and they would scissor sweep me every single time. And they were half my weight, just chucking me around. And I finally, one day, I just said, how? Every single time, how does this happen? And he goes, well, you have a tell. And I said, what do you mean I have a tell? He said, well, when you go to pass, he goes, you lean, and he goes, and you lean a third time. He goes, and every third time you lean, I'm kicking you over. And I remember, like you said, when somebody broke it down to me that simply, the next time we rolled, I went, eh, and I saw him smile, and I literally went to the right instead of the left. And his face was like stunned. And I said, I listened. That's all it
Yeah,
takes is somebody telling
100%.
you, when you're a blue belt and you tap out a higher belt, yeah, it's a feather in your cap, but you want to know how you did it, and that higher belt is going to remember that. And I will never forget. I won't say who. They won't know who it is, but I got a black belt with a straight arm lock once. And I
Nice.
remember thinking as I walked away, he's going to remember that. And the next time we roll, he's going to whoop my ass.
Yeah, but a part of it is, and again, I don't know who we're talking about, but like part of training is working on your offense, working on your attacks, but also working on your defense, working on not being caught, working on your positional game. But it's also putting yourself in vulnerable positions so you learn it. You don't panic when you're there in real
Yeah.
speed. And in doing that, if you're training properly, higher belts should be tapping to lower belts because if I'm thinking of it as, if I'm thinking like a high end purple belt is rolling with, and again, I'm not saying that's the situation with you guys,
No,
but
no.
um, you know, that's the time a purple belt can do that stuff, put himself in vulnerable positions, and work his way out. Because when he's rolling with a brown belt or black belt, he's probably not going to do that or need to do that. So he's going to bring his A game. Sometimes for the B game, or or sharpening up maybe things that you're not as good at, is with the lower belts.
Yeah. And I think, in that moment I learned, the next time we rolled, it's a much harder roll. And I don't think that was a vendetta. I think that was kind of like when you go from white to blue. I feel like when you get that blue belt, you go, I'm good at jujitsu. And you learn that everybody's kind of been holding back just a little bit,
Mhm.
just a little bit. And you roll that first time and you get destroyed. And for a moment you go, I guess I'm not that good. And you have the talk with them and they're like, if we killed every white belt that came in here, they would never come back.
No, that's true. That's true. And I think you owe it to the lower, the less experienced belts uh, to make sure they see what jujitsu is supposed to look like. Be as technical and use the minimum amount of strength that you need to use to get the job done.
Yeah.
Um,
And get rid of that white belt spaz and kind of develop them into a person because you are shaping them into a different human being. I've watched people go from white to blue to purple to brown all the way through the ranks. And you see them change as a character. You see them change as a human being because they've developed these skills, but they've developed that sense of like, well, I'm a brown belt now. I have to coach you. I'm a black belt now. I have to kind of teach. I can't just be that person going up. And it kind of changes who the person is. So I mean, given the fact that I hate to make it sound like you're old, but 20 years of doing this, like you've seen a lot of shit.
oh yeah, yeah. I've been doing almost 20, 28 years now. 20. Yeah, I think that's right. About 28 years.
And it's amazing because you are still, you've still got all these black belts. And I've seen it over the past few years where it's like you're seeing the people you've promoted to black belt and they're promoting people to black belt and they're promoting people. And it's kind of going through this chain where it's like it all leads back to you. And it's all that lineage that we're all so focused on when it comes to jujitsu because we're all focused on it, whether people want to say it or not. That lineage is important.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. I think because, well, for many reasons, but like also with the proliferation of jujitsu now, it's good to know where you got it from, who they got it from, and
Yeah.
like, you could trace your lineage back and be like, look, this is a legitimate line from, you know, Elio to Hoist to, to me to whatever, like it's legit. I think it's important.
Well, I'm like, you have one of the more defined ones when it comes down to it. Because like you said, from Haleo to Hoist to you, like that's a short lineage, like right there. But the
Yeah.
amount of people who have the connection to him, you talk about the five guys, total who were in that room who got promoted that day. Because generally speaking, in the years I've known you, everyone talks about you as the first, and this is the first time I've heard about the other four. And I think
Oh
that
yeah.
speaks the humble nature that comes with this sport too, because you're not trying to overstep anybody for something that happened almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, I do. A lot of people do use that moniker with me, but yeah, there was four of the guys with me that day. We all were the first.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And then it's like I've said, the black belts that I've seen come out of, your school, and then you've got the MMA fighters that come out under them. So, Arroyo being in the UFC, Billy Quarantillo, Matt Frivola, like all those people are connected to you in one way or another, even though they're not the jujitsu, they're not competing in jujitsu. They're competing in MMA. And so it's just been really fun to kind of watch that and try to follow that line because you've got one of the widest ones probably of anybody who's been on the show or anybody around nowadays. Like, let's be honest. So it's really cool that you're still pretty humble. Like, let's be let's be real here. Like, it's
Well, Hoist and Horian would say it. I think they had a great expression for it. It's like, you know, um, I give you the ingredients, you kind of, you know, adjust the taste. Like, what I'm saying? Yeah, I think It's important to make sure you establish solid fundamentals, a solid understanding about what jujitsu is. But there's guys in my network, I guess you can call it, who are like fantastic, amazing at say the footlock game, or their triangle game is just through the roof. And you know we gave them the fundamentals, we gave them everything they needed to get started, and maybe and then obviously we also showed them any tricks and things that we might have, or I might have to offer. But a lot of those guys went out and innovated on their own, and grew the art themselves. I mean, there's a lot of self discovery that goes on in jujitsu, a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I think a good instructor encourages self discovery. It encourages that type of mentality where you know they can look at a move and say, well, can we do it a little bit better? Can we do it a little different? Can I enter it from here? Can I enter it from there? I love that thought process, that mentality, and honestly, that's what keeps me excited about jujitsu. Is
and
the
that
idea
that was going to be my next thing, is like, how do you stay excited about that? But you're absolutely right. Like I said, I've had the pleasure of living in the same area as you, and seeing some of the guys that have come out of here. We're just going to call it network to make it a lot easier. But every one of them's different. They've all got that same fundamental Rob Kahn, list here. But then it's like, one of them's really good at this, and one of them's really good at that. And I know, I'm going to use this example just because it came up in the show recently, but I know Kevin Gallagher just promoted his first black belt just a few months ago. And I know there
yeah.
was a long talk about that, because it wasn't somebody who had been training the entire time with you guys, but it's somebody I know very well and personally. Um, and I know how much that meant to get that black belt, because I training with him in one academy and then training with him over at Gracie Trinity, it was like two different people. And when you
Oh,
train
really?
with somebody you've trained with for years, and I'm talking about Ryan Hauntz, you're gonna watch this, you're gonna know this because you've got your
Yeah, no,
black belt.
Ryan's a good dude. I like Ryan, and he's very talented.
Ryan got 100 times better, and I don't think it was anything to do with where he was training with us over at Newport Richie. I just think he got a different perspective. And I remember the first time I rolled him, it was 8 months after he left. And I could usually kind of hold my own with him. We had a really good, solid rolls, and he's one of 3 people to ever actually catch me in a triangle, because I'm not a small guy. You put me in a triangle, I stack, I smash. It's very uncomfortable for everybody. And I remember him he tapped me in like 30 not even 30 seconds. And I went, "What just happened?" And I remember sitting in on one of, Kevin's classes, and Kevin doing the snap. And I'm watching, and I'm just going,
He
I
stole the
think,
snap from me,
oh yeah, I know. That's why I did it.
and to be honest, I stole it from Royce Gracie. So, um,
That's fair enough. Not a bad place to steal it from.
no,
But I remember the first time he snapped when I was sitting in a class, and I went, "What? Okay." I'm not watching the move anymore. I'm watching his hand,
it brings
and
the
sitting.
attention where you need it to bring.
And it was the craziest thing for me. And I think anybody who's training out there in jujitsu, yes, you're loyal to your academy. Yes, you're loyal to your professor, but go to another school. Just try it out and see what they have to offer, because I think we all do the same thing. You train at the same place all the time. You know who you can roll with, you know who you can beat, you know who you can't beat, and you know who you don't want to roll with. And you stick to those 4 things. You kind of stick in that circle. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but I know I'm guilty of it. There's certain people I'm like, I don't want to roll with them. I just don't. And I think going somewhere and meeting completely new people on completely different skill sets, because one school is going to focus on guard passing, one school is going to focus on legs, one school is going to focus on arms. Like, everybody's going to bring something different to the table. And I
No,
really think like that cross training
100%.
aspect is going to improve your jujitsu 1,000 times.
I've always said to my guys, like, we've always had an open door policy. My guys have always been able to go anywhere they want, train wherever they want. My only my only preface was, if they saw something cool, bring it back and show it to the rest of them, show it to everybody else, because
Yeah.
there is no nobody has a lock on all the jujitsu. There's good jujitsu going on, or at least every school might have a certain thing that they do better than you're doing it, or a little detail that's different that you didn't think about or whatever. And it doesn't hurt the learning process to go and try other gyms. And the Brazilians used to have, it was, you were called a crianche, you were a trader if you ever went to another gym and trained in another gym, even as like a guest back in the day. And I just don't think that encourages learning, the best learning process.
No, and it doesn't encourage that growth. But I can see why the Brazilians were that way at one point. This was their martial art. It was called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You were, you
I
know,
mean, even in Brazil, and like when you were in Rio de Janeiro,
oh
if you were at
yeah,
Alliance,
really?
you couldn't go to Baja. If you were at Baja, you couldn't go to Carson Gracie. Like, it was very much, the lines were drawn back in the day. You couldn't go. You had to stay at, if you're at Carson, you had to stay at Carson or Alliance or whatever.
And now see, that's amazing because you don't hear about that as much. You don't
Yeah, the
talk about those
Brazilian
old days.
the Brazilian term was, apparently, it was coined by, this is the story I heard. It was coined by Carson Gracie, and Crianche is was what you called. It's like a trader, um, and it came from, I believe, a soap opera in Brazil, where this character Crianche was like a really bad person, like a real shady character, and it became the name for anybody who went from one gym to trained at a different gym.
Dude, that's crazy. And it's like if you go back, and I only know this because I won't say why I know this, but Gaijin, you go back to Japanese, like outsider, somebody who's, in that same category where it's like, you know, the loyalty that lies with jujitsu, with MMA more so, I would say less so nowadays because people are cross training every day. They're going here, they're going there. They're doing their boxing at one place, they're kickboxing at another, jujitsu at somewhere else. And sometimes they have it all encompassing, but it's amazing to think that like we have that freedom nowadays. We have that ability to, there are options where, talking to, guys like yourself, Ricardo Laborio, like you talk about those, there was one school, like there was one, and that was where you went. And, being lucky enough that you guys have been doing jujitsu, 27, 28 years, and for him even longer, like it's amazing that you guys have been a part of everything that's happened. Like everything that has happened in the area and through your schools, your academy, your teaching has been a direct line back to you and back to the teaching you got as well.
Oh, absolutely. And it just watching the explosion of jiu-jitsu in America, like being firsthand to see, like when I started, you wanted to do jiu-jitsu, you had to go to California, train either at the Gracie Academy or the Machado Academy. That was it. There wasn't really any, I mean, there might have been one or other that I don't know about, but that was it. Now it's in every freaking city in every state in the country,
Yeah.
you know?
And I say that we went to Old Bridge, New Jersey. Small little town, as my girlfriend's family was out there. And I remember driving down the street and I saw a Gracie Academy and I was like, what? What was that? Like we're in the middle of nowhere like this. There's nothing. It's on top of a bagel shop. I said, well, that's a good place for it.
Yeah,
But
no,
I just remember being like, they could be anywhere.
and just think about, like, we're now really just getting, in terms of America, like I said, there was very few. Actually, we've probably seen that first generation of kids, American kids, who started jujitsu, when they were, young, when they were like 10 or 8 or
Yeah.
younger, and now you're just seeing, like, the Gordon Ryans now, and the, like some of these
Oh,
freakish American athletes who are just taking over the sport. Um, because America just has usually we usually do really well at any sport we put our mind to, and you could see it. It's been happening. In my generation, I've watched it happen or starting to happen.
yeah. And it's Sorry, the first video that comes to mind with Gordon Ryan is when he went against Bo Nickel and Bo Nickel like German suplexed him. I'll never forget that one. That was one of those random videos that nobody talks about. But you're right. Like Gordon has done something different. He's become the face of American jiu-jitsu, if we're gonna call it that.
Yeah,
He's that person who
I
you're
mean,
just like,
he's the face of no gi jiu-jitsu. Period. Like,
yeah,
I mean, what he's done has been nothing short of like phenomenal. I mean, unprecedented, because jiu-jitsu has gotten much more competitive in the last 25 years that I've seen it, because so many more people are doing it. And for somebody to have that level of dominance while the sport has gotten way more competitive,
yeah,
super impressive.
yeah,
Super
abs-
impressive.
absolutely. And it's amazing to watch. And people can have their own opinions about steroids and everything else that's going on and the drama behind it. And
Well, he is not doing anything that everybody else at the highest level in that sport is doing. I mean, so I don't know why he should be penalized for, I mean, I hate to say it, but jujitsu is loaded with steroid
yeah,
athletes, and
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 you
uh,
see these
so
guys, and you're like, you're not, no, you don't get that way training grips, brother.
no, they're not just on the Gracie diet.
No. And dude, I think we could probably talk for hours about this, but I'm gonna cut us off now. But we have to have you back.
Yeah, I'd
You know,
love
I'm
to.
I love when you get on Facebook, your takes on things. People get all offended. It's kind of funny because you'll just say what's on your mind. And this Rob Kahn that showed up tonight was, the one I originally met, the reserved and the informative. And I really like that. Um,
Well,
because you got to tell the story. So I'm gonna leave with this. I want you to tell your favorite Royce Gracie story, one that you've probably never told before on
uh,
the air. You've probably told it in person, but tell me your favorite Royce story that Royce is probably going to call you afterwards and be like, "Why did you tell that?"
I'm trying to think. I mean, there's so many good stories with Royce. I'm trying to remember um, what was my favorite, um, and one that I can say on this video,
Yeah,
because
there you go.
you know he's tortured me in so many ways. Um, oh my God, I can't think of. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on you right now. Let me think.
we might
Let,
we might save this for next time. Let me give you something to think about. And
well,
I didn't mean to put you on the
I'll
spot,
give you
but
a story. I'll give you a cool
all right.
story about Hoist. This isn't like like super exciting, whatever. But years and years and years ago, when I moved to uh, when I first moved to Florida, I had long story short, but I got a potential deal to do something with Taser. The company that produces the tasers that
Oh shit.
shock
Okay.
everybody.
Yeah.
And they like the whole jujitsu crossover, whatever. And the deal wound up not going anywhere. But like they were doing something at the SHOT Show, I believe, which is like a big. I don't know if you know what the SHOT Show is, but it's like or maybe it was the Consumer Electronics Show. It's one of those big trade shows. It was gigantic, and they were like, I know this is short, because the deal kind of started happening really quick. And they're like, I know this is short notice, but could we get you out here to Las Vegas for the show? It's like in a day or 2 days or whatever. And I was like, yeah, sure. So they got me a ticket, and I was flying out there. And then like at the last minute, they're like, hey, do you think you can get Hoist out here for the unveiling of this thing? And I'm like, it was like literally
Like
like
I'm not
maybe
his
24 hours.
manager, but okay.
And it was like maybe like 24 hours notice, or something along those lines. It was very, very short notice at the very minimum. So I call Royce. I'm like, look, man, I got this deal. It might turn out to be something. Is there any way you can make it to Vegas for the SHOT Show or whatever show, or Consumer Electronics Show, whatever it was? And he was like, let me call you back, and like rearrange the schedule, like within like it was probably the day before.
Jeez.
Changed all the schedule around, jumped on a plane, flew out to the electronics show, stood at the freaking thing all day, glad handing with me for 8 hours, and like just didn't think twice about it. Like such a good dude. Like I always remember that, like how he dropped everything, flew out to another state just to see if this thing would work out for me. Like you don't get more honorable and loyal than that.
No, and that's the stories you want to hear about Hoist. And I know Obviously filming episode 68 and releasing it after episode 69, Jessica Borga actually talked about a funny interaction with Hoist where she went to get on the weigh-ins and she saw somebody leaning over and she was like, "Hey, you mind if I jump in front of you?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And she said, "I jumped on the scale and he stood up and it was Hoist." And she said he wanted to take a picture with me after I got my armbar. And I can't even fathom what that would be like for Hoist to say, you know what? Like, that shows me what kind of guy he really is. Your
Oh
story,
yeah,
him flying to a different state, but him, you have to think every time somebody does an armbar, he's like, "Yep, yep, that was me." And I remember at his seminar at Gracie HQ, where he was like, "Everybody tries to do this." He's like, "Pinch the legs," and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like we're changing, we're changing the game here.
yeah. No, his mastery of the fundamentals is just second to none. And
Yeah.
like I said, he's just been a incredibly good friend to me over the last 25 years or whatever it's been, 27 years. And and bear in mind, like his level of fame, he's pulled in I don't know how many directions all the time. He's never been anything but a really good friend, a good loyal friend to me.
No, and I really think like I look back on that day sitting in that circle with you guys, and I wish I had the appreciation I do now back then because I was just shocked that you would like push Hoist over or Hoist would like yell at you. Like it was like seeing actors, outside of their realm for the first time because you're like, "Oh, you can't do that." And I just remember everybody laughing, everybody thought it was hysterical and the stories you guys were telling, and I just remember being like, he's a human being. He's just a normal person.
Yeah, he's a
But
good, honorable dude, man. He really is.
and I really respect that. And one day we'll have him on the show. I'm not trying to get you to pull any strings there, but
We'll get him on here for sure.
but I think honestly, what I've seen you done and what I've seen you, and everybody can look at this as dick riding or whatever. Like I don't endorse things I don't believe in. I don't endorse people I don't believe in. And I'll never forget the first time we met. You were just so cool with me. Like you were like, "Oh, I know you." And it wasn't a long interaction, but it was something long enough where I was like, "Okay." And then I got to be part of that um Hasenia um you know event that Laborio had put on and getting to, film you, and you got there a little bit later and I was there to make sure that you got your picture taken. Like it's one of those cool situations where I'm like, jujitsu is just a different community, and people will probably never understand it unless they are ingrained in it and really give it a chance.
100%, 100%. It really is. And there's certain friendships that are forged on the mat that you're not going to get anywhere else.
No,
You know.
no, and I believe that 100%. So, with that being said, we're going to take this time to throw the sponsor reel. So, La Barba Cubana, the amazing beard care, Fat Boy Jiu Jitsu, you guys saw in a couple episodes before. Make sure to go to Fat Boy BJJ, use promo code Quiggin Out, and I believe you're going to get 15% off your order. It might be 10. Don't quote me on that. Tim underscore makes knives on Instagram. If you guys want a bladesmith, you're fans of Forged and Fire, go hit him up. He would love to make a blade and love to make those commissions. Bertzo's Bake Shop over in Orlando, amazing baked goods. Somebody I'll always support. And then the last two going with the Tales of a Concert Junkie. You guys have probably seen me post a lot of that stuff. You go to their website, use promo code Quiggin Out for 15% off your order. And if you're looking for any MMA gear, BJJ gear, check out Rev Gear and use that promo code Quiggin Out to get a discount off your order as well. So I know that was a lot, but Rob, like, this has been a long time coming. I know scheduling and everything else, and we always talk about that. Post pandemic, it's harder to schedule with people than it was like during it, because everybody didn't have shit to do. But
Yeah,
um,
they're all inside.
on behalf of myself, Combat Press, the Quiggin Out MMA podcast, like it's been truly an honor to have you on the show. I'm
I
super
had a blast.
appreciative
We
of
got
your
to do this
time.
again.
And dude, even having you like share the episodes, it's really cool to see just your name and my name underneath it. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like this show has gotten given me the avenue to be able to talk to people I never thought I'd talk to on a regular level. People that I've interacted with for years that I'm like, listen, bring them on the show. And then I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't know if we were going to talk about random shit that pisses people off on the internet that you like to do, or if we were going to talk about everything we did. And I think that's the fun part of this show, is we never know what we're going to get. And I really think like this episode was truly informative when it came to, your journey, what jiu-jitsu means to you, and what the future may hold, going forward. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you, Matt. I had a blast. Let me know when you want to do it again.
Hey, definitely. Thank you so much, brother.
See you, man. Peace.
Hey, guys, don't forget to hit the subscribe, little bell, keep you up to date on all things Quiggin Out. Thanks again.